Star Destroyers are one of the most iconic classes of starship in Star Wars. For most fans, the name conjures up images of the most infamous Star Destroyers, the Imperial 1 and Imperial 2 classes. Fans of Star Wars The Clone Wars are also familiar with the older Venator-class Star Destroyer, a Republic Navy design. But all of these famous warship classes can trace their design lineage back to a much less well-known ship, the Victory-class Star Destroyer. Like the Venator, the Victory was a Clone Wars era Star Destroyer, a groundbreaking innovation that forever transformed naval combat. In this video, we'll be telling the story of this forgotten ship.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Early in the Clone Wars, in the wake of the acclamated class assault ship's success, Kuat Drive Yards and Rendili Star Drive collaborated on the Victor Initiative project, which sought to design a large, powerful, next-generation flagship for the Republic Navy. Designed by the shipwrights Wallex and Lyra Blissex, the new vessels would be classified by Kuat Drive Yards and Anaxis War College as Star Destroyers, heavily armed warships about a kilometer long. The flagship project of the Victor Initiative was the Victory-class Star Destroyer, designed by Wallex Blissex, and the first of the Star Destroyer designs. However, the second design, Lyra Blissex Venator-class Star Destroyer, was rushed into production first, as the Republic needed its new warships fast and the design for the Victory class was still being tweaked. Starting at the end of 22 BBY, the Venator class entered production at Kuat Drive Yards and quickly became the backbone of the Republic Navy. Rendili Star Drive, which didn't have a stake in the Venator class, wasn't very happy about the newer design being premiered first, but it continued to collaborate with KDY on the Victory class anyway. For about a year and a half, the Venator class was the only Star Destroyer in production, making it the most common command ship in the Republic Navy. This was despite the fact that it was more designed for a support role. The Venator functioned primarily as a carrier and was probably intended to support the Victory class, which was far more suited to the role of a mainline battleship. However, as the Victory class continued to endure development hell, the Venator class took over both roles with a moderate degree of success. In 20 BBY, new developments in the war forced a paradigm shift. That year, Separatist Admiral Juaningo broke the Republic's blockade of the Foro shipyards with the new fleet of densely armored Bulwark-class battlecruisers. These ships were so heavily armored that they could ram lesser vehicles with impunity. They were also heavily armed. As such, Ningo decided to take his Bulwark fleet on a joyride across Sector 0, the very heart of the Republic. Desperate to stop the Bulwark fleet, the Republic ordered KDY and Rendili to rush the Victory class into production. The first ships of this class were assembled into the Victory fleet, which was led by commanders Jan Dodona and Terranald Screed. They chased the Bulwark fleet all over the sector, repeatedly battling Ningo to a draw before finally vaporizing the Admiral and his fleet above Anaxis. Dodona and Screed became heroes, and the news of their victory spread like wildfire. More Victory-class Star Destroyers were immediately commissioned, and before long, they became a popular Republic Navy flagship. Visually, the Victory-class Star Destroyer bore a strong resemblance to the later Imperial-class Star Destroyer, though at 900 meters, the Victory was a little over half of the size. Like the Imperial class, this wedge-shaped warship featured a cluster of 3 main drive engines, 2 hangar bays, a reactor bulb on its ventral side, and a distinctive hammer-shaped conning tower that housed command bridge and twin shield generators. However, the Victory class had a number of notable external differences from its successor. The most obvious differences were 2 pairs of large, protruding armored flaps on either side of the ship's aft section, which could fan out to reveal the warship's missile tubes. The bridge stalk also featured a pair of thin towers that protruded noticeably from the main structure, a top-mounted comms array, and a forward-mounted observation station. At full strength, a Victory-class Star Destroyer supported 4,798 crew members, though it could operate on a crew of 1,785. This was considerably smaller than the crew of the Venator-class Star Destroyer, a vessel which was only slightly larger. The Victory class could also carry 2,040 troops into battle, which was roughly equal to the Venator's troop capacity. Unlike the Venator, however, The Victory class was designed to coordinate planetary operations, so it was generally preferred as a troop carrier. While the Venator was infamous for its mediocre armoring, especially around the long dorsal hangar strip, the Victory was built like a tank with fewer vulnerable hangars and far fewer weak points in its armor. It also had better shields, owing to the advanced shield projectors mounted atop the bridge stalk. The Victory could carry but a few dozen starfighters plus a handful of shuttles and groundcraft, while the Venator could carry over 400 fighters. These disparities make sense when you consider the roles these two Star Destroyers were originally supposed to fill. The Victory was meant to be a mainline battleship, while the Venator was meant to be a carrier. As a battleship first and foremost, the Victory class Star Destroyer was heavily armed, much more so than the Venator. Apart from its 10 tractor beam projectors, the Victory class featured a total of 50 turbo laser turrets, 5 times the number sported by the Venator. 10 of these were powerful quad turbo lasers mounted along the Star Destroyer's broadsides, while the remaining 40 were dual turbo lasers, with 30 mounted along the broadsides and 10 forward batteries. Additionally, the Victory class featured 2 massive arrays of concussion missile tubes, totaling 80, all of which were protected by the broadside armor flaps. Curiously, the Victory doesn't seem to have had any point defense turrets, but this may just have been a sourcebook oversight. As you can probably tell, the Victory class excelled in ship-to-ship combat. It could shrug off plenty of damage and dish out far more in return. Its many turbo lasers, which covered both broadside and forearcs, could rapidly tear through Separatist cruisers, while its torpedo launchers could unleash a frightening amount of damage, enough to bring down even Lucrehulk class battleships. With that said, the Victory class wasn't without its flaws. The initial run of these Star Destroyers was slow and had subpar maneuverability, a shortcoming that the Victor Initiative didn't have time to correct before the Victory was rushed into production. Late in the Clone Wars, KDY and Rendili put out the Victory 2 class Star Destroyer, which was tweaked a little to correct some of its flaws. The Victory 2 had much more powerful engines, eliminating the speed issue, and they had also swapped out the Victory 1's concussion missiles for more turbo lasers and 10 heavy ion cannons. By the time of the Battle of Coruscant, both Victory class variants were in use, though the Victory 1 was much more numerous. Due to its late premiere, the Victory class never really surpassed the Venator class as the main Star Destroyer in the Republic Navy. After the Victory's launch, the ships usually served as the flagships of flotillas composed mostly of the Venator class. Additionally, many Jedi generals continued to use Venator class vessels as their flagships despite the advantages of the Victory class, limiting the spread of the newer, tougher Star Destroyers. It was only after the end of the Clone Wars, when the Jedi were purged from military command and the Republic had transformed into the Empire, that the Victory class finally surpassed the Venator in popularity. Of course, by that point, both Star Destroyer designs had competitors. Late in the Clone Wars, Lyra Blissex put out 2 new Star Destroyer designs based heavily on the Victory class. In the final days of the war, beginning at the Battle of Coruscant, the first of these new ships entered service and rapidly supplanted the older Star Destroyers. These were the Imperator class and Tector class Star Destroyers, each twice as long as the Victory and far more powerful. After Imperialization, the Imperator class became the Imperial class and the new backbone of the Imperial Navy. However, the Victory class remained in service. It was widely considered second only to the Imperial class, and it was about as common as the larger vessels for most of the Dark Time. The Victory usually served in planetary defense roles, but it was frequently used in larger battles during the Galactic Civil War, often to great effect. They supported Imperial class vessels very effectively, especially the Victory 1 and its concussion missile tubes. While the Victory developed a reputation as antiquated, it continued to see plenty of action even after the Battle of Endor. After the remnants of the Empire came under the command of Grand Admiral Thrawn, the Victory class saw a new boom in popularity due to a shortage of larger warships. In our opinion, the Victory class was probably the coolest Star Destroyer, but what do you think? Do you agree? If you were a warship captain, would you prefer the Victory or the Venator? Let us know all your thoughts and more in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.